Welcome to Every Part of Us. We are two psychologists named Ruth from opposite sides of the world who are passionate about Schema Couples Therapy.
This model provides a powerful and unique toolkit to help therapists work with complexity in couples.
Welcome to the Every Part of Us podcast. I'm excited to be here with you, Ruth, this morning, this afternoon, or tonight, whenever people are watching, to give an introduction to this podcast, because we really want this series to give you a rich experience of what schema therapy is about for couples and hear from experts in the field. But maybe we should just kick off our series today by saying, what is it like when a couple walks into a room for schema couples therapy? What's happening? What's it all about?
Yeah, I guess with it's we're always in the first instance trying to think about, how much healthy foundation of the couple got, in their relationship. And so the questions we'll be asking at the outset are really around thinking, about what a couple needs from one another and how much they can meet each other's needs, because it's, schema therapy is a needs-based approach, isn't it?
And you say needs, Ruth, like we all know what a need is. We need air and water. We definitely need that. But what else do we need?
Well, I guess, when Jeffrey Young developed the schema therapy model, he was really thinking about, how much when we meet our clients as adults, how much did they get their original attachment needs met? And those can really vary. It's not just were they nurtured, were they, really cared for and seen and made to feel acceptable, but could they be, could the parents play with them as children? Could they put limits around them when they got angry? These are all really, really important parts, aren't they, of what children need.
Early childhood and middle childhood and later childhood experiences are really the school room for relationships, aren't they? They're how we learn how to do relationships. And so I guess what you're saying is in those early years, were those emotional needs met? Were those developmental needs met? And
Mm.
if they weren't met, how would that then play out for a couple?
Yeah, absolutely. If they weren't met, yeah, that's right, Ruth. I guess because that's how Jeffrey Young originally thought about in the schema model of when needs weren't met, children had to learn to cope in their families to survive. And this is where he formed the ideas of schemas, didn't he? Of these lifelong patterns that evolve, from original attachment experiences, i.e., a child who feels criticized a lot in their family growing up, or they're bullied at school might have a defectiveness schema. They might feel very bad about themselves from the repeated unmet need of acceptance, and then grow up, in their adult life to really be very sensitive to that unmet need and to have coped with that as a child in a particular way, that maybe it's by sort of withdrawing and feeling bad about themselves and internalizing those messages. And unfortunately, and this is where it's very relevant in couples therapy, isn't it, Ruth? Because then they carry that into the relationship with their partner. That's what's really tough.
But just as you mentioned that, I'm thinking, already of a bunch of couples where one person has that really strong sense of defectiveness. And so we've got this really strong internal voice, internal critic mode that's constantly telling them they're not good enough, or they're a bad partner, or they're broken. And the couples I'm thinking of, one in particular, where that voice was so loud for decades. And the person in that couple just needed relief from it. And
Yes,
what they'd learned to do was to drink, to game, to shut down, to run away, lots of avoiding ways, because for them it was so hard to be in their head. They really had to shut it down a lot. But of course, that led to some behaviors that were really not okay for their partner. There was a gambling problem, there was drinking problems, there was things that were really negative in the couple dynamic. So what does their partner do? She says, "You've done this again. What's wrong with you? How have you gambled our money away? How are you drinking every night?" So unfortunately, the way that this person had learnt to cope and shut down that internal criticism actually generated a whole pile of complications, which led their partner to be highly critical
Yeah,
of
yeah,
them, confirming that sense of
yeah,
defectiveness.
yeah,
And so
exactly.
that's a really nice example, I think, of how those unmet needs that were so long ago were actually playing out in the couple dynamic, and we needed to unpack that.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really nice example of how often you get this, don't you, Ruth, of schemas mirroring one another in a couple, but the coping modes could be different, but often partners are attracted as well to people who reinforce their schemas because they're attracted to what is familiar. I mean, I guess what we're thinking about in this example, we're talking about defectiveness schema, but of course there are 18 schemas in total, aren't there, in different themes of attachment. But in this instance, I guess with defectiveness, yeah, that partner could drink and that partner and be quite checked out and then neglect their partner emotionally. And then the other partner could feel defective, but feel they're quite sort of, they get quite needy and need lots of reassurance and kind of want to be accepted, so keep trying to get through to the other one, and then the other partner can feel even more like, well, then I'm just going to go and game or detach and soothe myself away from my partner, and that becomes really problematic. It's the coping modes that then create the clash.
Mm,
So tricky,
mm.
isn't it, and painful for couples.
Yeah, and I think we've just outlined, one of those schemas, one of those unmet needs for acceptance. But it could also be something like, say, emotional deprivation, or abandonment, where somebody, has had experiences of a parent leaving or a parent being distracted or just misattuned, right? So
Mhm.
their experience is, I'm never really seen, or I can't really rely on another person. So the
Mhm.
people are not going to be the source of care for me. And as you said, they could cope with that in a few different ways. They might cope with that by latching on and becoming very clingy and demanding to be
Yeah.
heard. They might become very distant and not actually, find it very hard to be vulnerable in a relationship because they don't want to be abandoned. They don't want to be ignored. So best if I don't give them anything to ignore. So
Yes.
the
Yes.
people are doing that really strong coping, and as you said, might then be attracted to an emotionally unavailable partner, mirroring that experience of childhood. And so they might present in the room to us for couples therapy and say, we're so stuck. We early on we just fought and we were angry. Now we're distant, or maybe we've always been distant. There's a lot of ways these things can play out. But as schema therapists, we're looking and saying, where are the pain points for these people and where did they learn them?
Yeah. So when we're thinking, so I guess, Ruth, that's right. When we're thinking about this foundation, it's quite a complex picture, really, isn't it? That we're trying to gather information on. We're trying not only to think about the early lives of each partner, but then what needs were met and weren't met. How do they learn to cope as children? How have they come together as adults to create this chemistry together, as you're saying? And understanding that chemistry, that schema chemistry, we call it, is really vital in helping couples understand that when they get into fights, it's not just the here and now props of the conflict that are the issue. It's those much deeper needs which keep jarring against each other. I mean, how would you summarize schema chemistry, Ruth?
Well, I think schema chemistry is a way of us being highly attracted to a partner who's going to replicate our experience of needs not getting met. And even though it's definitely the last thing we want at a conscious level, at an
Yeah.
unconscious level, it's kind of like a magnet. And so part of, I guess, what we are looking at is how much of a couple's dynamic was built on a high combustible, high excitement chemistry that is kind of setting them up for distress, and how much do we need to, like unpack that and rebuild that. Some couples, there may be elements of schema chemistry, but it's not a high chemistry. For some couples, they might say, we got together, we just knew we were meant to be together the first moment we met. 3 months later, we'd moved in together,
Yeah.
and there may be a high level of chemistry that's going to take a lot more work than if there might be elements of schema chemistry, but not, complete chemistry basis. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I guess that the hope part of schema therapy is that once couples realize that schema chemistry is there, we can really help each partner to see those early attachment wounds and give a new way of relating and responding to meet those needs and break free of the chemistry. And that's so profound, isn't it, when couples feel that corrective, we call it a corrective emotional experience. But I guess so that's something we're really looking to think about as well in that initial assessment, isn't it? Of, what is a healthy foundation? How much healthy adult has each partner got? Um,
And that's a good point, just thinking about healthy adult, because I think part of what we're thinking about there is how much is this person able to notice what's going on for them, to be aware of that pain or distress, to kind of soothe some of it, to become, to self-soothe, but also to how to reach out to their partner in a way that invites a positive response. So
mhm.
many of the times that we're working with people, they've gotten stuck in patterns where perhaps it's all of, that they feel like their partner's always to blame. If you were less, if you were spending less money, if you were less critical, if you were more connected, I would be okay. And there is absolutely elements of that in the dynamic, but it's not always about the other person. It's sometimes about what am I also bringing to this
Yeah,
situation. And
yeah.
and so I think early on we are thinking, how much schema chemistry is there? What are those early pain points that are sitting in the room? And how much capacity does this person have to understand that, to soothe it, and to communicate their needs to their partner?
Absolutely. And that can differ, I guess, depending upon sometimes one partner has gone and had their own therapy, for example, and they can be further along the road, can't they, to that
Mm,
self-soothing and that having that sort of reflective meta-awareness that couples
mm,
really, really need to kind of understand their dynamic. But absolutely. I guess the other area we're looking at when we meet couples are any relationship injuries as well that might have occurred that might need deeper healing along the way. That's especially important for betrayals, isn't it?
yeah. Yes, one of the common things driving couples to couples therapy is, injuries that are perhaps having affairs, betraying of trust, breaches that are about spending or about breaking of rules, whether they were spoken or unspoken in the couple dynamic. And so, certainly in Schema Couples Therapy, we are also helping people to manage the fallout, the initial distress of that betrayal or that breach, but also then start to unpack what things were happening in the relationship prior, and looking at these things like unmet needs and coping that might have set the stage for some of these breaches and betrayals.
Mm. Yeah. So I guess all of this information we're getting in that, the first sort of 4 sessions, aren't we? We're tending to sort of have that. I don't know about you. I tend to meet a couple for a session and then meet them individually to get some of the information about the background, what were their
Mm,
lives like growing up, what their original templates were in terms of how did I learn to love and be cared for, well, my needs are met or not. And then get together to really look at how those coping modes that we're thinking about today in schemas are existing, but also creating a clash or a cycle where both partners are getting stuck and into conflict. Um,
mm.
and I guess once you've got that in place, it really gives a couple a good understanding of where, a map for change, really, doesn't it? Once that's there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think mapping out how couples do their dance together is such a powerful thing. And certainly other modalities do that too. Emotion focused therapy can focus very particularly on that attachment dance and the way that couples sort of the pattern works. I guess one of the key things that Schema Couples Therapy does when we're mapping out a couple cycle is we're starting to notice what are some of the main modes that are involved in the cycle. Is there that avoidant kind of coping that we talked about before, that detached protector or that detached self-soother, where I kind of run from intimacy or run from distress into a substance or just run emotionally? Or maybe there's a bully attack mode. Maybe there's a side of one of the couple, when they get hurt, they get aggressive, they get
Mm.
angry, they get harsh. So we're starting, I think particularly in schema couples therapy, it's such a powerful tool to start to externalize the part of a client or part of a couple that is really difficult and explore it with curiosity. Where did this come from? Where did you learn it? Is there a survival need that it has met for you? And is there maybe a different way of getting that need met? I think schema couples therapy uses chair work, uses imagery, uses some really powerful tools to not just teach couples skills or behaviors, but actually kind of different experiences in the room that help them start to shift.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's what's so powerful, I guess, in this idea of having a parts of self approach, in that we've got the healthy adult and the child part there that we're always appealing to in a couple, of saying, you've got two, in a way, we've got two children in the room here that will meet their needs, and inviting the healthy adult part of the client to be able to talk about these ways of coping, like you say, Ruth, that can be really, really problematic in creating clashes, whether it's getting very angry and escalating or withdrawing and shutting down, but creates so much loneliness for each partner and misunderstanding. So yeah, it's a lovely frame to have. And I think the idea of a parts of self approach really helps you as a clinician to be able to invite the couple, and when you're talking about a part, to say, but you've always got your healthy adult there, you've always got your child part there, they're both, to make it's a way of kind of de-shaming and making couples feel like, well, actually I'm human, and all of it, because we can make it quite clear as therapists, can't we? We all have schemas, we all have modes. You're not alone. I get into these situations with my partner where I argue, and can be critical because that's part of me, but I also have healthy adult there too, and that's the
Mm.
self-disclosure part of change as well, isn't it, in schema therapy, that we really involve ourselves as therapists to be with our clients too.
Yeah, there's a really lovely concept in schema therapy called limited reparenting, and it's a very challenging part for the therapist, but very powerful. Where part of what we're doing in the room in a limited way is meeting some of those unmet needs. So we just talked before about that client with huge amounts of defectiveness. There was a really powerful moment in the room where I was able to look him in the eye and say, I see you, and there's nothing wrong with you. And I know you're trying your best. There's a side of you that is trying to help, but ends up doing a whole pile of damage. But there's a little boy in there who is really lovable. And as I started modeling some of that, I could see his partner kind of being a little bit curious and seeing a softer side of him emerge that actually was more open to sharing and communicating, which is what she was looking for. And so limited reparenting, I think is a challenging thing for therapists, but actually very powerful. And then it starts to help couples to think about, how can I relate to my partner and their vulnerability differently? Because I think in our cultures, we're often taught, if you criticize your partner, you'll help them. You just need to point out their deficiencies and they'll change. But so often, actually, we don't change. We go into a coping mode. We start to fight back, or we detach, or we even just surrender and give in, but we're not really wanting to change. I think one of the powerful things I've seen in schema couples therapy is partners start to see that vulnerable side of their partner, to actually see that little person inside, or that sad part, and speak to that part. And one of the most powerful things that we do is imagery work, where we actually, go back in time and start to, do some work using neuroplasticity, using a beautiful framework to help give that corrective emotional experience, not just in the room, but in the memory of the person who's sitting in front of us.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that's where you get the opportunity for partners to really be able to heal their schemas together. I'm just thinking about a couple I saw where the woman in the couple had quite abusive experiences in her teenage years. She had a very abusive boyfriend, that would really be physically, sexually abusive to her. And so she felt very coerced and powerless, and very subjugated, and met her husband and was subjugate to him sexually as well. And then it transpired later on, this all came out, that she'd been sort of almost performing herself as a partner to appease him. But then she was able to, once we named this, she was able to be very honest with him. And he felt very sort of emotionally connected to her. And then we did some imagery on this where he could come into the image and actually really stand up for her against this boyfriend and actually protect her. And it was so profoundly healing to be able to go in to this moment in time, this memory. But suddenly he, in her mind, because he would become an abuser sexually, he would become a person who was another person using her body, but she would be subjugating on the surface of things. So he wasn't aware until we were able to name what was going in the dynamic. And he was actually a really loving, supportive partner. But then, and she could understand that rationally, but her body didn't understand it because the trauma was locked into the arousal system. So to do this image was really, really profound, and be able to get that shift going of feeling, actually getting the felt experience of change.
What a beautiful story, of healing. I think it's a very powerful couples work that you're talking about there. And I noticed that as you talked about it, you said, that he was safe, right? So these are kind of very powerful interventions we're doing with couples. We're only doing when there's a level of safety in the room. We're not doing this when there's high conflict, when there's not much trust. We're building those things earlier on in the therapy. We might be reducing that bully attack mode and doing some work on, finding other ways to express your needs so that we can create enough safety to do this very intimate, very powerful work for couples. I also think one of the great things about Schema Couples Therapy is it allows us to work, as you're talking about, on childhood trauma from
Yeah,
a very different lens.
yeah.
That's a perfect example what you gave us before. But I've seen time and again that harm happens in relationships as humans, but so does healing. And I
Mm.
think when you've got a safe bond with your partner, there's a lot of healing that can happen related to childhood trauma.
Mm. Yes. So yeah, and that's absolutely right. So in a way, what we've thought through today is, first we've got the assessment, the establishing what's the foundation of the relationship. Then we're going into the treatment process. But you're right, Ruth. First of all, it's looking at that conflict cycle, creating safety in the communication through the, attending to the modes, and then going into the sort of deeper imagery work once a couple finds safety. And I guess in doing the conflict work, another important tool is chair work as well, isn't it?
Mm.
That's
Yes, chair work is, I think, a fun part of schema therapy where we get a chance to really put some parts of self on a chair. And I remember a couple I was working with where one of them had a lot of issues with lying. They would lie about things they didn't need to lie about, and they'd lie about things that were big things. And so we put the part of that person on a chair. I asked him to go and sit on the chair, and I said, what are we going to call this part? So we gave it a name, and we started to unpack the history of this side of him. And he had a really clear memory of the first time lying came in handy for him, got him out of a difficult situation, made him popular. So we really could start to see that as a little person, it met some needs. It met needs to matter, to be connected. If I'm boring by myself, but I can tell these great stories, and then I'm the life of the party. It's just that now in his couple dynamic, it was wrecking the relationship. So we then could do a dialogue between the healthy adult part of this person and the lying side and start to talk to that part about the damage it was doing and set some limits. And then we even had an opportunity for his partner to talk to the empty chair where that lying part was sitting. And she, very powerfully expressed the pain and distress and damage it was doing. And again, we had a beautiful corrective emotional experience, a healing experience for the couple, but using chairs to start to put the parts out a little bit more external. Yeah.
That's a lovely example, Ruth. And I think that's also so important when you're working with betrayals as well, isn't it? To be able to put in a very similar way, there often is a part of the partner who has been unfaithful, that has learned to be secretive. But often then when you take it, it usually always goes back to childhood, like you're saying. And when you can take it back to childhood, lying can often also relate to powerlessness, or having a parent that was oppressive and authoritarian, or all sorts of parenting that was really toxic. Often there's a little child in there that just learned to do that to survive. But in the context of a betrayal, that's so important to help the wounded partner feel like, okay, there was a once upon a time to this that wasn't personal to me, and that there's hope for my partner changing and really, so you're kind of allying the two healthy parts of the couple together, aren't you?
Mm, mm. In
Um,
fact, later on in our series, we'll be hearing from some experts
mm,
who are working with hypersexuality and narcissism. So, some really complex presentations and how they work with these parts of self to bring healing and change to couples. So, I'm really looking forward to hearing from Wendy Bihari and Liz Lacey on those topics.
absolutely. I'm just thinking, are there any other areas, Ruth, while we're on this sort of idea of the interventions? Anything we've missed there?
Well, I guess one thing that we are often doing, is a connection dialogue, an ability to really turn to your partner and express a need, and for your partner to hear that need and respond and meet the need like that. That I think is a bread and butter type experience that we're wanting to give our couples each session. So I'm often as a therapist looking for a moment in session where they're able to connect in that powerful way, because all of the skills and techniques and information I could give them is nothing compared to that moment where they look at each other and really see each other, really connect, really accept or hear whatever it is. That is some of I think, the magic moments in Schema Couples Therapy.
Yeah, and that's right. That's a thread of attunement, isn't it? I guess we're always, as couple therapists, thinking about, because it's probably the most common schema for couples, isn't it? The emotional deprivation schema and the unmet need there is, it's partly warmth and can I be held and cuddled as a child, but it's partly, can I be mirrored and really deeply, deeply understood and seen in my experiences. So I suppose
Mm.
that tuning lens is always one we've got through the whole of the therapy process. And then the other is sort of the managing conflicts, like we thought about earlier.
And I guess just, popped into my head, how could we forget sex and couples? That's an important area. It's an important area where schemas and modes play out. And so in schema couples therapy, we are also looking at how do people connect in that physical way? How do they build intimacy or desire? How do they repair broken trust sexually? So we're absolutely looking at many issues, but I don't know how I forgot that we also talk about sex.
Yeah. And that's always, yeah, and that in and of itself is really important to make couples safe with and take it off the table for a while we get the emotional bond in place. But yes, it's such an important part of healing.
Mm.
And often that's through getting couples being playful as well together, isn't it? And a bit more able to feel alive and autonomous enough not to sort of dependent on one another, that they can have breathing space, have a sort of irreverence together, and create that, because that's another area of unmet need for children, isn't it? That they can actually separate from their parents and be individuate, be separate, and have that encouragement for autonomy.
And that's a really, lovely thing that Esther Perel talks about, right? When she talks about the fact that for some couples, there's too much closeness, there's too much
Yeah.
weirdness, and for other couples, there's too much distance. And so sex is a way that closeness and distance plays out.
Yeah,
And I think one of the core things that schema therapy gives us is a lens through which to help heal and resolve some of those dilemmas for couples. Speaking of ways of healing and helping resolve issues, one of the things we're doing in our podcast is not just talking, but we're actually practicing. We're watching, we're seeing role plays, we're hearing experts and watching them live. Ruth, I wonder, can I put you on the spot and ask you to help us to have a bit of a felt sense of what all this is about?
Yeah, so if you're out there and you'd like to have a go at trying imagery, I'm just going to guide you through. So wherever you are, if you can find somewhere comfortable to sit and just be comfortable. And it'll take a few minutes. And of course, just see how it goes, and obviously if you don't feel comfortable, just stop at any time. And if you're in a relationship, then I'm going to be inviting you to use this as an example for the imagery. If you're not, if you can think of a past relationship, just to draw upon the exercise. And if you can just close your eyes and just allow an image to come to mind where you felt really emotionally seen by your partner. Imagine that you've shared maybe some vulnerability, and they're looking at you with openness and curiosity, wanting to understand you. You smile and look deeply into your eyes. Imagine that you have a sense that they really, really get you. They can feel your experience, and they look really moved by what you're sharing. What does that feel like in your body to have them respond in this way? What physical sensations are there? Is it lightness or warmth? Focusing right in on that sense of feeling emotionally close and deeply understood. What do you have the urge to do? Do you want to lean into your partner? Or it may be that you have the desire to pull away. So allow whatever feelings that arise to be and make space for those feelings. Maybe it's hard to feel close right now. Maybe there's some anger or distance. That's okay too. Just welcome in whatever feeling is there as it arises. Now, drawing upon any positive emotions, I'd like you to enlarge these to fill you up and invite real expansion into these feelings. And now, what do you need from your partner? And can you imagine that they meet your needs in whatever way is meaningful to you right now? Maybe it's a hug, touch, to share something together. Just allow your partner to give you exactly what you need. And now just checking in with your body. What is happening as you sort of stay with this moment of warmth and connection? Just allow these feelings to flow through your body. And if it feels safe, maybe you can just ask for any other needs that you have. And notice what it's like to ask. And now, whenever you're ready, I wonder if you could open your eyes. Just coming back into the room. And what I did just there is an imagery exercise. And as you could feel, maybe, I just wanted to give you a taster of how powerful imagery is, because it actually takes us really back into a moment in time as if we were really there. And so this is so powerful for couples when we use imagery, to be able to give them an experience of going into a moment in time, to make an image a new experience where they can feel really profoundly safe or connected and have their needs met.
I wonder if for some people that was a really beautiful, positive, enjoyable, connecting feelings. For some people, it may have brought up some sadness, some hurt, some distress. Those things can be complicated. So we want to encourage people to take care of yourself in this moment, and perhaps there is some things that you would like to talk about with a schema therapist or a schema couples therapist, even coming out of that imagery. Well, I hope this gives you all a framework for what's to come in the Every Part of Us podcast, as we learn from some experts, as we bring some of the excellent techniques and insights on a whole range of topics. We look forward to seeing you then.